Hi everybody, this is Anne. Today I wanted to do a tutorial on using canvases in Daz Studio. This tutorial is going to be part 1, which will be going over the settings within Daz Studio. There will be other parts to this tutorial. I'm not sure how many yet. Those parts will be going over what to do with those once you create them. So the first thing I wanted to kind of go over here was that behind my title sequence here, you can see the image in question that we're going to be doing. I made sure to put in some emissives and some depth of field and some other stuff. The only thing I really didn't add was atmospherics, and that's just because it adds a lot of render time, but I wanted to show that you can kind of put a lot of different things into the scene and it'll all still work. There's also a couple other things that I want to go over kind of before we get started on the tutorial part. So the first thing is that when we are working with canvases, there's going to be a specific file type that can be created, which is called an EXR file. I kind of just quickly brought up the definitions for that. There's a few different kind of to give you an idea of what EXR is. It's a 32-bit format. In like Windows Explorer, it will kind of look like this. I don't know what it would look like in Mac. It may look similar. But the files look like this right here. And not all 2D software applications can use the file. So before you take the files into another app to do post work, you have to double check to make sure that that program can actually accept that file format. It is a high dynamic range, which means that it's going to record more color data in the file than what, say, a regular JPEG or PNG, stuff like that will. You can take this file format and then convert it into PNGs or JPEGs, etc. If for some reason, though, you do not have a 2D application that will actually open an EXR, in some cases you can buy, or you can either buy or download for free something that may open in your application, like an extra plugin, something like that. Or there is actually kind of a workaround where you can save PNGs. Just know that it's not going to have the same depth of information. And it also may not look identical to what the EXR file would have. So, okay, before we kind of get into the scene, I wanted to go over what's seen in the scene. So this is the character I have within my scene. This is the hair. This is the outfit. This is the pose, and I used this one right here, I'm pretty sure. This is the environment within the scene. Some additional little odds and ends that I put in. I used some of the flowers and stuff from this set. This is actually a really nice set if you just want extra like leaves or flowers or a little bit of extra grass and stuff like that. I really like this set. And then I used the candles from this set and also the HDRs and I think the render settings. And then this is not actually in this render, but it does go with this set, so I figured I would kick it up there too. So without further ado, let's get into Daz Studio here. So the first thing you're going to notice, here's my scene. I've got my scene editor going here. My render settings are over here. What we're going to be doing is all going to be within the render settings tab. So if it's not open for you, go to Window, Panes, and then down to render settings to get it open. Once you have it open, if it's over here, just press and hold the left mouse button on the tab and drag and drop it to the other side, because there's going to be some parts of this where it's actually easier to be able to get at the scene and also at this render settings tab at the same time, like to have them both open. So in this specific case, I advise it. So normally my render settings tab is actually right here. But when I do this, I just kind of drag it over here, do it, and then drag it back again kind of deal. And I thought that was worth pointing out. When you go through, this is what it generally always looks like when you're doing an iRay render. You will see, like, you've got general, render mode, alpha, all that. If you want to get to canvases, you have to go from editor to advanced. And then most of the time you're going to be on hardware here. You have to click to canvases. At this point, if I hit the check mark and I go back over to editor, now you're going to see there's another thing here that says canvases. And over here, there's a drop down with absolutely nothing in it because we put nothing in here so far. So that is the first thing worth noticing. Now, the way canvases work, and we're going to kind of close this part and this part up for a minute. Before you set up any canvases, I would suggest looking at your scene and thinking about how you do post work. Like when you go into Photoshop or you go into PaintShop Pro or GIMP or whatever it is you use, Infinity Photo, there's a lot of them. What things do you normally edit, modify, or try to play around with? For me, I do a lot of playing around with like the hair. Sometimes I play with the color or add more shine to it or try to take shine out of it. I can mess around sometimes with the skin coloring or skin tone or the way the light kind of is hitting the skin or what color the light is projecting on the skin. I also will do some work usually on the clothing. Sometimes I will play with, like, say, the lighting of the scene, stuff like that. Knowing sort of what it is that you do or what within your specific scene you want to be able to get at or play around with easily before you go into canvases is a smart thing. So I suggest not taking a long time, but just a couple minutes to go, okay, well, I might want to do some adjustments to the hair. I know I've got a couple spotlights. I might not like how they came out. I might want to change the colors of those spotlights. I, like to play around with the skin coloring. I may want to adjust that. I may want to adjust the clothes. Maybe I want to add blur more to the background. Like, kind of just have all of that in your head before you do this. Now, once we get in here, some things, especially the workaround part of this, gets a little confusing. I'm going to try to do my best to explain. If I don't explain in a way that makes sense, let me know. I can always do a secondary tutorial just on that, or I can try to answer questions, because some of this is a little odd if you try to not get the EXRs and actually try to export out PNGs. So the first thing we need to do to add a canvas is just hit a plus. First thing you're going to see is it's going to say Canvas 1, Beauty. I usually always do one that is just a beauty canvas, nothing special, no extra things selected here. And I just normally name that like full scene or something similar. Sorry, I'm giving myself a little cheat sheet so I remember how I set everything up. So I would sit here and label it, full, we'll do the space, full scene, enter. And this is just going to be basically like if you rendered the image normally. If you save out the EXR of this, then it will actually have more color and more range and more ability to adjust it than what the normal PNG or JPEG would. But that's about the only difference. There's a little bit more color to it. So you have a little more saturation and stuff like that you can play with. But if we were to render this scene, and I pre-rendered a lot of stuff because there's a lot of stuff here, what I would get is going, whoops, of course it landed on the wrong window. What I would get would be just this. This is the straight render of the scene. There's nothing exciting there. Please do ignore my little pixelies. I didn't render any of this stuff super proper. I just, because there were so many renders, I kind of rendered quick. But anyways, this is what I would get, just a full regular render. Now when you're doing this stuff, instead of just rendering regularly, if you have the ability to do EXRs, instead of just hitting render, you may actually want to add a canvas and do the render this way. And then open the EXR because it will give you more color data. It gives you up to 32 bits of data as opposed to 8. That's the difference. That said, you don't necessarily need that. Obviously, people do wonders with the 8 bits of data more than well, but it's an option. It is worth pointing out that now if I now go back to editor and look, now I do have something in this dropdown, which is just full scene. If I were to render this right now, I would get that image and I would get it as either a JPEG, PNG, TIFF, or bitmap, plus also the EXR. So you would get 2 different file formats, whichever of these 4 you pick here, and then also the EXR. When you're rendering in this format, I would advise like PNG or TIFF, probably above like JPEG and stuff like that, just so it can keep transparencies and that kind of thing. Okay, let's go back into advanced and back to our canvas. So that would be the first canvas. That just shows you we added 1 canvas. If I keep hitting plus, I can add 1,000,000 canvases at once if I want to. I tend to do them one at a time so I can step through what it is I want to render. So for this second canvas, I'm going to make a canvas. I'm going to label this as just G8. I'm going to hit enter. On this, let's see here. I am going to leave it on beauty. I'm going to click alpha. And now I'm going to decide what I mean by G8. In this case, what I want to do is grab all of her skin. I want to get just her skin to be able to modify in my scene separate. Now, when I render this out, it's going to be useful in a couple ways in 2D applications, and I will show you how to use all these things in Postwork after all of this, but just to go through kind of how you do it. So in this case, this has to do with Genesis 8. So I can come over here to the scene, and I can click on Genesis 8 and hit and press Control and click on her eyelashes too. And I can go where it says nodes right here, and it says none, and I can hit create from selection. What that is going to do is add a node down in here with G8 selected. Now, instead of doing it that way, I'm going to do it a different way. I'm going to do all the rest of these that way. But I'll do this the long way. If you want to do it the long way, what you do is you hit a plus. You would type in G8 here. I suggest you name it kind of what you did this so that you know what goes to what, because it does get confusing. Now what you're going to have is this. So like some arrows. Basically, it's like a selection set. Like it's trying to figure out what polygons or what object, what item is in this selection. You're going to hit the dots and you're just going to click off. Okay, I want Genesis 8 and I think I want her eyelashes. And you're going to hit accept. Now we have a selection set here. What we have not done is told this that we want to pick that selection. So we need to do that now. So now what this is going to do is render G8 on an alpha by itself. So if I hit render right now on just this level, ignoring that this one exists, if I just rendered this level, what I would get would be this. Which, boy, is that stark white. But if you kind of zoom in here, what you can see is it kind of feathered out around the hair. It pulled out all of the clothes as a separate thing. It did leave the shadows from the clothes with the skin, because that's where it would be. This can also be a good way to see if you got a little bit of poke through, like I do right here. This should all be white. It's not. There might be just a little bit with the shoes. I don't think so though, but there might be a little bit. But this can actually be a good way to render through and see if you're getting poked through on clothes somewhere, stuff like that. But so as you can see, it literally is just putting everything on a transparency but the skin. or everything on white but the skin. If I open this up in Photoshop, this is all going to be just transparent. So it's just going to be her skin on a transparent layer. That will make it so that you can actually just adjust this without adjusting the whole rest of this. So you can just target this area. Okay, so we've done that. Now, I had said before, you know, I like to do hair. So let's add hair. So we're just going to type in hair, inner. I'm going to do another alpha. This time, instead of doing this the long way, I'm going to come over here. I'm going to click on the hair. I'm going to click this and do create from selection. It's going to pop up this. I'm going to type hair. And I'm going to hit accept. Now, see, it already made the node for me. It already added the selection for me. And it already added that node here for me. So I don't have to do that in 3 separate steps. That's why I think I like this better. So, okay, there's that node. If I render that one out, I get just this. So there's just the hair. You'll see that the pieces from her face, her skin, the little branches on the outfit, all of that is pulled out of there. It is literally just the hair that's showing here. Okay, so next, I'm going to do the same thing, only this time I am going to do close. So we're going to do close. And I'm going to leave it on beauty. I'm going to check off alpha here. I'm going to actually add all the clothes at one time. Now you could do like one that was shirt, one that was top, one that was shoes. You could separate them all out. I just tend to put all the clothes together like this. I'm going to go back to this, do create from selection. I'm going to name that clothes, hit accept. And now that one's all set up. If I were to render this one out, I would have this. And now you can see my little poke. And maybe I did have a little bit down here somewhere. Anyways, now I have just the clothes on its own layer. So don't like how this looks, don't like the color tones, don't like something about it. Now I can just target this and it won't change the hair or the skin. Okay, so now we've done all of those. That's very handy. The next thing that is worth taking a look at is, okay, we've been doing beauty, 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 beauty. Now, most of the time, that may be all you ever need to do. Just do different beauty renders. It gives you different areas that you can target. You bring those in, use those as selections or to modify, change your image, and that's it. That said, though, this is a lot more powerful than that. Like, you can do more than just render beauty. So you can also render the full scene as just a diffuse. Now, what diffuse is going to do, and I'm going to click it up here, come on, is give you the flattest, funniest looking image you've ever seen. So if I were to compare this, snap, will ya? If I were to compare this to this one, so that you can see the differences here, we're going to zoom in just on her. What you are going to notice is, okay, you don't see all the little light flecks in her hair anymore. Her eyes are completely missing. That's because it's actually the white to her eyes is from a different channel. You will see that you're getting no shine on the head, around the nose, on the lips, down the arms, no shine to the clothing at all, although there wasn't much on there except for maybe on the flowers anyways. You'll see that the candles are missing their lights. Basically what it's doing is taking out all of the additional like emissive, the specular highlights, the glossy highlights, is just a plain flat render. Now this can be useful. You can take this and combine it with a couple other things to actually layer up all the different things that create this look, meaning that you can then modify within the different layers. Now, because I have rendered this out, I will show the different ways that you can use it and what to do with it, but I just wanted to give an idea of basically what, you know, what the difference is, what diffuse looks like and what it's doing. So, okay, we can close these. I'll minimize this again. If I were to switch to Specular, what I am going to get is actually going to be the most worthless render in this specific case. But I basically am just going to get like the glow of her eyes, those speckles from her hair, some speckles that were back on some bushes, basically, like some specular elements. If I were to take this into Photoshop and play with it, there would be a lot more data here, which is something that is worth pointing out at this point, which is just some general notes. So an EXR file will always record more data and colors than the PNGs, the TIFFs, the JPEGs. So if you convert or open the EXRs, use the EXRs, especially true with things like lights, emissives, specular canvases, etc. The EXRs are going to be better than doing the PNGs. So if you can do the EXR, do the EXR. I generally do not check off the alpha, except for if I want to be able to target a very specific thing, like a specific bush or a specific tree or just the hair or just the clothes. And most of the time I do those in beauty renders, mostly because when you do a beauty render and check off alpha, it is going to give you like the regular layer, and then it is going to give you the alpha channel for that layer. Both will help you to target certain things. So it's like getting 2 for 1. It's why I do it that way. The emissives you can render, and we haven't gotten to them yet, but just to kind of give a note, the emissives you can render with alpha on, but I did not do that so that I could catch the light better. So when we get to that, there's a reason. I think I will stop there because my other notes that I had for this are actually things that are coming. So I'll go back to that emissive note in a minute here. And okay, so that was going over the specular result. Then, so in my case, most of the time I don't actually do the specular one. You can, in which case you would just type like, you know, specular, enter, just leave this all the way it is. And sadly, I didn't actually do a new thing for that. But if you wanted to do the specular, put this back to beauty. I accidentally didn't add a new line. But okay, you would just basically come here, type in specular without mistyping everything, hit enter, do the drop down, click specular. The next one in the list is going to be the glossy. And this one actually can be very worth doing. And if I render this, hey, come back here. What I am going to get is this render. Now this is literally rendering out every single glossy area within this scene. So the gloss on the grass, the gloss that's showing on the pavement, the slight glossiness that's on the clothes, the slight glossiness that's on the environment. So it puts all of this data like basically on its own. So you could just play with basically the specular highlights and change a lot of things in your image based on just changing these highlights and their coloring. So a lot of times that can be fun to leave there. The next one down is going to be the emissives. Now, like I said previously, oops, I think I spelled emissive wrong. I'm fired. Okay. If I do the emissives, I think I usually put this. You can click off alpha. I generally don't because the way I use this stuff, it's not necessary, but you can. You could do the emissives of the entire scene just on one, or you could break those down and do multiple, like emissives, candles, emissives, torches, emissives, like whatever, however many emissives you have, you could separate them all out so that you could target those individual colors. I tend to just do it like as a flat render because I use this layer usually if I want to punch up or brighten up the emissives in some way, or kind of adjust the color of it a little bit. If I've got multiple colored emissives within the scene, then I will separate them down into colors. In which case, then I probably would click off the alpha or just add nodes to it without the alpha checked. But so if I render emissives, if I would render this right now, what I would get would be, this would be the result. You can see you've got the, you know, little circles, the flame on the candles. Now I will say that the EXR version of this has a ton more information in it. I don't think I saved a separate, no, I didn't save that out to kind of show you. I'll show that in the next videos. But so that's the emissives. The next one we would probably want to take a look at is going to be light group. Now in my case, I have two spotlights in here, so I'm going to do spotlight 1. They were 2 different color spotlights, so I'm going to actually do spotlight 1, spotlight 2. And open this up, click on spotlight 1, come over here, create from selection, name it spotlight 1, hit enter, do the next one. Gonna name it spotlight 2, change this to light group again. So basically what I'm doing is saying that, you know, in this case I want to render the light, basically. Create from selection, spotlight 2, enter. Okay, those are set up. Now if I hit render on this first one, I am going to get this. Now, if we were to compare this back to the original again, what you are going to notice is that there is a lot of orange in this scene that is all missing from this scene. That is because spotlight 1 was a blue spotlight that I had in this scene. So this layer, or this render, is only actually picking up what the blue hit in this scene. So all of the blue is rendering through here. Spotlight 2, and I'm just going to hit next to bring that up. When I render that, is giving me this. This is actually all of the areas that spotlight 2 is hitting. And actually, my spotlight 2 was kind of right back in here. It was shining more directly on the hair and then kind of spreading out from there. So it's basically a backlight. Now, this kind of render, like spotlight 1 render, a spotlight 2 render, a light group render, is a good way to get a feel for, like, if you're trying to do rim lights and you want to get a really good idea of what it's hitting. This does a pretty fine job of that. It shows you like how much of the hair it's going through, how it's affecting the clothes, how it's affecting the ground, how it's affecting some of the pieces over here. So you could use that as a kind of a way to adjust or better fine tune, just do quick renders of just this until you get it kind of where you want and then move on from there. But so that is what doing the spotlight ones will do. So that's spotlight 1, spotlight 2. There is also, I'm just going to add a new layer for now. The next thing in here is going to be environment lighting. If I render that out, which I'm not going to add one of those to my little group here, but if I did, environment, where are we at? I don't know. Okay, this would be the environment result, which is the saddest looking thing ever. You can see that my spotlights were doing a lot of the hard and heavy lifting. But so my environment light was actually very dim. It's actually really pixely because it was so dim. It's basically like you rendered my scene by shutting the 2 spotlights off. This is what you would get. It also shuts off all of these lights as well. So all of the external things that were lighting my scene have now been shut off. Now, if I was to put this or the diffuse render as my bottom layer and then put like the specular one and the glossy one and light 1 and light 2 and my emissive one all on top of this, and then switch all those layers to linear light or addition within my 2D app, I could literally build from the ground up all of the lighting and coloring to this image, which we will probably go through and kind of show. But so that gives you an idea of what that does. In this particular image's case, that layer wouldn't necessarily be useful. I would probably just use the full scene beauty one to start. The next thing here is alpha. Now, I'm pretty sure what it's supposed to do in theory is just render, you know, an alpha, like a black and white image of, like, say, the clothes or G8 or whatever. My thing is I can't get the alphas to render. I have no idea why. That the EXR isn't working for me, and none of the other file formats are. I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong. If anybody knows, please let me know. I'm not perfect and I don't know everything, so I'm always happy to learn too. And then you could tell everybody. LP, I also can't get to do anything, regardless if I check stuff off, don't check something off. I am not sure what that is for. So those two I can't get to function. I'm not sure if it's me or DS. We're gonna go with it's not DS, it's me. The next one is normal. Now this one, you can see there is no options here. The only thing I can do is just hit normal. If I were to render this out, I think I have one. Yes. This would be the result. It's kind of crazy looking. I think that it doesn't actually anti-alias this for some reason because it's very blotchy. I didn't find this exceedingly useful. The only thing I could see this being very useful for is if you wanted to add kind of more noise, because this is definitely very noisy. If you wanted to add a little bit more noise or maybe a little bit more detail to an image, you could take this in, basically turn it to black and white or like a grayscale, switch it to soft light and turn it like way down and maybe add some detail to a render with this. But mostly I don't use this one personally. That doesn't mean other people couldn't find uses that I'm not finding, but at least you can see what it looks like when it comes out. The next one that I do advise doing is going to be something called depth, a depth render. Now, that is going to be here, and you'll see there's no extra settings for this. So it's just going to render the whole scene. What that is going to do is it's going to render basically this black and white, grayscale, however you want to look at it, representation of the depth within the image. So things closest are going to be darker, things further are going to be lighter. So this background, which is kind of like to infinity or way in the distance, is further away than this. This candle is further away than this one. This candle further away than this one. She is closer to us than this other stuff. This tree is closer to us than this stuff. It basically gives depth. This can be really handy for faking depth of field within your 2D application. So if you don't like to try to set it up within Daz Studio, this map can help you to target areas in your scene within like Photoshop or PaintShop Pro or GIMP or Affinity Photo, etc. So if you don't set up DOF, or even if you do and you just want to do more with it, then I suggest rendering this one out. And then last but not least is going to be, new layer, one called Material ID. They're going to pick that from the drop down. Now, I am not actually going to go over these two because that's another one that I couldn't find much of a use for, and I got to leave you something to just play with, right? So we'll allow you to play with those ones, with these two and these two. If they work for you, I will be very happy. I can't get any of them to do anything that I would find handy. But okay, so Material ID. You would select that. That's another one that's just going to do full scene. Now, if you just hit render now, you're not really going to get anything. In some cases, you really won't get anything. In some cases, you're going to get something that looks very weird. This particular thing, there's a setup that you have to do first. So you would select it, do Material ID, add it to the canvases, and then you will need to go to surfaces, or, you know, if it's not open, then window, and somewhere in here is going to be surfaces, I'm sure, right there, to bring it up. And then you're going to need to select things in the scene. So like I can click on Genesis 8. Now I can click on Genesis 8 as a whole, or I can click on just her nails, or just her skin, or just her lips, or specific surfaces. In my case, I'm going to pick as a whole, and Material ID is this right here. So you would click there and you would select a color. Like we'll say I pick this color. And then you would go to, like, say her shoes, click on that, click, select a color. Oh, I'll go up here, hit OK. And you would do that for every single material that you want to possibly be able to get at within your 2D application. So like I went through this render and pretty much kind of grouped by, like, I don't know if I did all the clothes together or I individualized that. Let's see. Oh, I individualized it. So basically what I did was went through and did, you know, the shoes, the top, the skirt, the hair, her skin, all of my candles, all these leaf patches, the couple flower patches, and my grass clump back here, and colored them all different colors. Now I could have done it with the main background, which would have been here. I just didn't. Now one thing to keep in mind, what this is going to do is enable you to select by color specific things within your scene. That said, when you render this out, you have to render it really huge and then scale it back down, because it's going to be super pixely, kind of like, you can see it here, but kind of like the other thing that I said didn't anti-alias really, which was the normal. So it's gonna kind of render a little more pixely like this is. So I suggest rendering it at least double size and then shrinking it back down to the size that you want, which will get rid of some of that. So this is me rendering it huge, bring it back in, shrinking it down. So this had a process. It's not straight out of DS. And again, you can see where I had poke. I'd probably want to clean up this and color it this same yellow. Same with down here, probably some, if I were to use this. But it is a way to kind of be able to use select by color to get at certain specific areas, to target them and change them. So if there's additional areas you want to be able to get at, you could use the Material ID to do that. Okay, so at this point, we have now pretty much gone through all of what there is here under canvases. At least the stuff that I can. Like I said, this and this, basically I just got like another regular render with maybe a little bit tighter shadows. I tried adjusting things. It wasn't changing anything. I'll admit though, I don't really play with interactive mode. If anybody else does, like I said, I am always happy to learn stuff new. And like I said, for me, this and this were just not working. Like they didn't seem to really do much of anything. But at least we went over all of these other ones and how you get them. Now, the one thing I wanted to point out was I did have notes, and I guess I will just pull my notes over here and then you can see them while I kind of go over them. Now, we kind of went over these couple, and I mentioned about the emissives and saying that you can render with the alpha on, but I don't, to catch all the light cast. The alpha can be checked off or not for the light groups. Either way, it pretty much renders the full scene. So I tend to only check off alpha for stuff like G8, hair, clothes, bush, stuff like that, when I'm doing beauty renders and just want to render that specific area or specific item, and then don't check it off for anything else. Distance and depth, because there is one that I forgot to do, which was one that says distance. They seem to render there's depth, there's distance. They seem to render very, very similar. There's a very slight color difference, and I feel like one or the other of them might give you a bit more depth data, but not by tons. Like, I didn't see huge differences. I don't know that you would need to do both of those. They are very similar, but you could play with it and see what you think. Maybe one gives you something that I missed over the other, but it seemed really minimal, at least for this scene. Depth, distance, and normal. You need to use EXR. So for those ones, please be aware that, hold on, I don't know what that was doing. For depth, distance, and normal, I gave PNGs so that you could see it, but I actually had to take this one, and this one into Photoshop and convert the EXR. So if you are not able to open EXRs, these three you won't be able to get. Or not that I can see. Maybe they render out in TIFF or JPEG or something. You could try that. I didn't try all of the four other. I just tried PNG, and it just rendered like kind of a black. Or it didn't render, no, it didn't render anything out at all. It only gave me the EXR. Another thing worth pointing out is Specular, you can render in PNG, but the EXR actually does give more data in the Specular, which I brought that up when I added that channel. And then Material ID, we went through all this, and that is all of the extra notes that I had. I tried to, when I was testing things and playing and stuff like that, I tried to write some notes, so there was little details that I didn't forget. But so this pretty much covers setting this all up. The only other thing worth pointing out is that the workaround, if you can't open an EXR in your external program. Now Photoshop, you can get a plugin for it so that you can, but by default it doesn't, or at least not in older versions of Photoshop. 5 and 6, well, 5 and 6 you can get a plugin. Before 5 you can't open it at all, and after 6 it may be built in, but I'm not positive because I don't have the newer version of Photoshop. I have 6. I have CS6. So Affinity Photo can open the EXR. GIMP can open the EXR. PaintShop Pro, I'm not entirely sure. I own it, but I didn't check. So that one's a toss-up for me. It kind of depends on whether the app you have will or won't take it. If it does not, like if you look into the app, and I would just search Google, like, you know, open EXR and blah, blah, blah app. If you can't, then what you will need to do is pretty much work this one thing at a time. So like I have all of these, we'll see them as layers here. So all this layered data. When I hit render, if I hit render right now, what it is going to do is render this very first one, so Full Scene Beauty, as a PNG and also an EXR, and then also render at the same time all of these in EXR format. So all the rest that's here is going to be in EXR. So if you need to get at PNGs of this stuff because you can't open an EXR, what you will need to do is basically get rid of all these other layers and just do one at a time, like Full Scene Beauty, render, get the PNG. Delete that, put a new one in, G8 Beauty, render, and then you'll get the PNG. Basically, whatever the main thing is what you get the PNG from. So if we go back to editor and look at canvases, if I render from here and I pick G8 and hit render, it's going to give me a PNG of this and then EXEs of full scene and all the rest beneath it. If I click on hair and hit render, it is going to give me a PNG, TIFF, JPEG, whatever I picked, and the EXR of hair, and then give me the EXRs of all the rest of them. So whichever one you're on. So I find that having a big list like this, in that case, is probably not that useful, because you're just going to keep rendering and re-rendering the same EXRs for all the other layers that you're not on over and over again, which just seems silly. So in that case, you would just kind of want to get rid of all this stuff and just basically do one line, render that, hit minus to delete it, add a new one, put the next one in, you know, G8 Beauty, but it would be here instead with nothing else, and then hit render. So it'd basically be like if all this was gone, you just kind of... That's the one thing that's really sad is I tried hitting control and clicking multiple ones of these. I can't seem to get it to delete. It only seems to want to delete the one you clicked on, which just is a bummer. But so basically you would just do one, hit render, you get the PNG and the EXR of that, get rid of it, click this, do the next one, like G8, enter, add my alpha, add my node, render that one. I would get the PNG and the EXR of this, and just do them one at a time like that. And all the ones that can do a JPEG, a TIFF, a PNG, whatever, will. So that way you don't necessarily have to open an EXR, convert it, make it into this or that. You don't have to do any of that. You literally could just get the PNGs. Now, again, there may be something that I'm missing somewhere. There may be some extra thing that you can do. I don't know that there's anything in tips. No, I don't see anything that necessarily... I don't know if there's anything else you could do to do that different. But I do know that that works. So if you need the PNGs, that's a way to get at them. And I think that basically covers it as far as how to get all of, you know, all of these layers. And in my case, what I actually did was did all the EXRs. So I got all of these layers, and that is what Material ID looks like. But so I actually did all the EXRs. So that endeth this tutorial. The next tutorial would be, okay, I've got all these EXRs or PNGs or whatever. Now what do I do? So please join me in next video. And if you have any questions, please be sure to ask below. And please consider subscribing. Thanks for watching. Bye.